Oh, hello there. What, this old thing? Well, there's a new edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle on the way, don't you know? Welcome to Old World News. Greetings one and all, and here we are again with our third edition of Old World News, and that is because we have yet more news about the Old World and the upcoming release next year. This is yet another article from Warhammer Community, and the last time we took a look at this, we looked at the initial start of the phase and the turn and the new features therein. Well, in this phase, we're going back to basics and we're looking at movement. Now, this article takes us through the movement phase in the new system, which should be very good for us to get a good look at how things are and maybe what is different to the old editions of the game. I keep saying old editions. They're claiming that this is a brand new game, but it's still, at the end of the day, taking a lot of inspiration from classic Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And so as far as I'm concerned, this is just 9th edition, if you will. With a different story setting. But here we go. So we're looking at formations, and this is fairly similar from what we've seen so far. We've got our classic close order, open order. We've got skirmish and lance formations, and that is essentially very similar to the original game. Lance formation and close and open order, units must be ranked and touching in their given formations. Skirmish, models must be within 1 inch of another model in their unit. So that makes very little different to what we've seen previously. What is different, however, is the way we have combat order and marching column. This is new, and I'm not sure how this is going to affect a classic march move, because in the old editions you would be able to just sheath your weapon, put your bow over your shoulder and double time, march double your movement to get closer to the action of the battle. In this case, it looks like you need to reform. So combat order is when the unit is wider than it is deep, so they are presenting more weapons, be they blades, axes, bows, whatever it is, towards the enemy in a bid to have the most number of people fighting at a given time. That's essentially how we've always played the game. Marching column, on the other hand, changes the shape of the unit so that it is longer than it is wide, and therefore they are better equipped to move quickly. And so reforming a combat unit into marching column allows that unit to triple its move speed. Now, whether that gets rid of the traditional W move march, or whether that's still there and this is a further bonus to movement, I do not know. But it's certainly interesting. Changing, I mean, firstly, a lot of hassle to do if you're going to have to pop units off and pop them on the back and get a different movement tray out. But if it does enable you to get around the battlefield that much more quickly, then that's great. Obviously, problems with it. If you have got a narrow front and a much longer flank, and your rear is further away, then you are much more prone to be hit in those flanks by skirmishing cavalry and anything that's essentially faster than you and better prepared to charge from a distance. But having said that, there's tactical options here and I like it a lot. So we'll see what develops with that in the rules themselves, which obviously are going to be a bit more detailed than just this article. Obviously they're finishing at the end. Units for the skirmish rule do not need to rank at all, and open order units fight in ranks, but are faster and more agile to handle the rough terrain better. Now, movement phase. Here we are. We're moving slowly through them. And so movement phase in this game, obviously we've taken that start of turn phase out and created its own command phase. But movement phase seems fairly similar. You declare your charges, you then do charge reactions, you then do compulsory moves, you then do remaining moves, and then the phase of the turn moves on to shooting. So declare charges, pretty similar to how it's always been really. You pick a unit, you announce which unit it will charge, and as charging is the only way to enter combat essentially, unless you've got a unit that just spirals through. I'm thinking Night Goblin fanatics. Then you proceed from there, and you do it one at a time, pick a unit, and then you see if you can make your charge. And so, slight difference at this point as well, when we get to actually making the charge moves. Now, in 8th edition, you declared your charge, you took your unit's movement value, you rolled 2d6, and you added the total to the movement value, and that was your range. In Warhammer The Old World, you roll those 2d6 and you pick only the best to add to your movement value. And they give an example here. A unit of skeleton warriors has a charge range of between 5 and 10 inches. So they've clearly got a basic movement of 4 and then 1 to 6 on top of that. It does say that Bretonnian Knights are rather more dangerous. Their Swift Stride special rule allows them to add an extra d6. So I imagine Bretonnian Knights have 8 to 10 inch of movement, and then they will roll 2d6, pick the highest, and then roll an additional d6 and add that, which will give them, theoretically, assuming 10 inch range, that will then give them theoretically a maximum 22 inch charge, which seems a lot, if I'm honest. But also, if they do that, they're going to leave most of the army behind. So it's all about the tactics and what you want to do with it. It's great getting into combat, but if you suddenly get swamped by everybody else, then that's the last stand right there, and you're not going to be in it for much longer than that. You may take out one unit, but you will lose your own. And so, as always, it's a balance. Yeah, so it's interesting to see what they're doing there. They have clearly slowed the game down quite a lot and given cavalry, well, certainly Bretonnian cavalry at least, this advantage of having supercharges. But I like the idea that you can't charge more than, what, if it was adding 2d6 to a skeleton warrior's 4 inches, then adding 12 to that, that's charging 4 times potentially their normal move. If they hit 12, add their 4, 16, that is 4 times their normal move. I mean, you can't imagine skeleton warriors picking up the pace that much as the shambling undead animated creatures that they are. So it makes a lot of sense, and it'll slow the game down and allow for your archers and your war machines to be in the game for longer. It'll really increase the effectiveness of cavalry and the way that your skirmishing cavalry can hit the flanks, and positioning is going to be all important, because to charge you've got to get pretty close. I mean, skeleton warriors, 10 inches is not a lot in the battlefield, and that's only if you're rolling a 6. I mean, on average you're going to roll, what, 4, so 8 inches. You need 8 inches to charge your skeleton warriors. More often than not, against faster units, they are going to be charged, they will not be charging, and so positioning is going to be crucial, and what you have around your units and the way you deploy your force because of this shorter charge distance is going to be all the more important in this edition, and I do quite like that. That's going to be very good. So yes, obviously charging, move your charges. Step 3 is compulsory moves, as it always has been. In between that, charge reactions, of course. Charge reactions being hold your ground, take it on the chin, stand and shoot, always my favourite if you've got it, if you're archers, and then you may either flee, and in some unique cases you might countercharge, and so everyone just goes slam together, which is always fun. But again, I imagine that'll be a unit special rule rather than an option for the mechanic for the majority of both. And so compulsory moves again, sorry, coming back to that third step. This is where your fleeing units do their thing and they leg it. Anything that failed to rally moves in this step. Random movement things such as Night Goblin Fanatics, or again, the same example as last time, Stone Troll Stupidity. That will happen here, and that is fairly similar to old editions, as is the fourth step, which is just remaining moves. And again, as anything here, this is exactly the same as we've seen before. It's just get your moves. Anything that's not moved already, that's not compulsory, that's not charging, this is where you get to move it. Obviously you don't have to, and this is where you will choose to reform or make your changes to the shape of the units in exchange for some of your movement or all of it, depending on what you're doing. Certain things are very similar to the old one. This is a explanation of the wheel maneuver, and this is exactly the same as it was, albeit with a different graphic, from 8th edition. And so things are very similar, just pivot, move, and movement in this has always been more complex than in 40k and Age of Sigma. It's about maintaining cohesion of your ranks, because at the end of the day it's the mass rank charge that matters, and units that fall apart become easy picking for those who maintain their cohesion. So the rules are very much designed to maintain the shape of your forces as they get into battle, and that's very important. So yeah, things like that are looking very similar to before. As it says here, so it may wheel, which pivot the front corners as you've always done. You may turn your models through 90 or 180 degrees, spending a quarter of your movement for each 90 degrees. You may move backwards or shuffle sideways at half pace, and you may redress the ranks or reform, which is where if you're redressing the ranks, if you've taken casualties, you may want to reshape your unit into some more even sized ranks. And reforming the unit looks very much to be moving from the one we saw up here, from combat order to marching column, and vice versa. So it's very familiar. There seems to be a couple of changes that are very interesting, particularly marching column. That one looks really interesting. I'm still intrigued to see as whether that replaces the actual double movement march or not, or whether it is just single and triple, or whether we've got single, double and triple, depending on whether you're willing to risk your formation in the meantime. Certainly though, plenty of tactics to be had there, and with the reduced charges, plenty of options to plan and prepare your force to receive a charge and to make them. And that is what Fantasy Battle's all about. It's what all massed unit games should be all about, and that is positioning, placement, charges, and units working together to cover each other's flanks. And so I'm really excited for it. And that's it. That's where we get, but we do get a lovely hint at the bottom, and that is, obviously we've seen the strategy phase. We're talking about the movement phase. The next one up, and we're just, as I said in the last video, they're going to go through the phases of the turn. We're going to see the shooting phase, and at some point I hope we're going to see a stat line, because I'm really eager to see. Obviously we've talked about move characteristics and we've talked about leadership characteristics. We've not talked about any of the other very important characteristics in the middle. Are we going to change things so that instead of having a reverse weapon skill, ballistic skill tree, where it used to be weapon skill 4 and you would roll a dice on the table to see what that is versus what you had to do, or is it going to be like the more modern Warhammer 40,000 where it becomes 2+ or 3+, and it's just, this is the dice roll you need to hit and this is how good they are at shooting. So will that change or will it not? I don't know. Will the initiative characteristic survive? It better had, because I love it. But all these things are going to be revealed at some point in the very near future. Once we get to the shooting phase information, which should be out next week, I do feel that we're going to see at least more of the stat line, because we're going to need to know what you're rolling against in order to make these shots, and I think that that will be something that they're going to have to cover. So great. Until then, why don't you subscribe, like, share with your friends, and that way you'll know when we release the next one of these, and you can join me next week for that one. Maybe me, maybe Gaz, who knows? Until then, I'm going back to painting. Take care.